Hi, all. This is Ginger. Today, we're going to jump back into our series we're calling Getting Personal with Personal Finance. I'm interviewing Anne, who has recently quit her job and is in the process of downsizing, like moving in 2 days in the process. She's currently wondering what's next, and Fi has given her some freedom to explore that, I think, in some pretty interesting ways. I really wanted to talk to Anne because she's doing something that so many of us in this community read about and think about. But of course, there's a big difference between thinking and doing. So I want to pick her brain about this process, what's been hard, what's been emotional, maybe what's been fun. I hope you enjoy this conversation. This is Choose FI. Hey, Anne, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ginger, it's great to see you. Great to meet you.
It's so wonderful to finally get to see each other's faces. We've been emailing back and forth a little bit. I am really excited to talk to you about your journey, but let's start with where you are right now. What has been happening in the last 2 weeks?
So, right now at this moment, I am in the basement of an Airbnb in Hilltop, Tacoma. This has been the place where my husband and I have been searching for a place to rent for a year. We move in on Friday. We found a condo, 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo in the West End. It's 1,220 square feet, which is half the size of our 2,300 square foot home, 5-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage that we left in Anchorage. So that's part of the downsizing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our stuff arrives on Friday. We had a 24-foot trailer and then discovered with all of our purging and donating and reprioritizing that we only filled half of that trailer. So 12 by 12 foot is all of our lives packed into that container. And now we are going to unpack on Friday and figure out how we use this new space and live in a condo community. We've 26 years in a single family home. And so now we're going to live in a condo community. And I've only ever stayed in condos on vacations in Mexico and Hawaii. So this seems like I don't know, it's just all different. It's all
Yeah.
totally different and a lot of fun.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of context here. How old are you? How old are your children?
So I am 53. My husband is 56. We have 4 adult children. I have 2 stepkids who are 36 and 37. And we have 2 kids who are young adults, I should say, who are now 22 and 25. So they've all flown the coop. And my husband just retired after 30 years of service with the Anchorage School District. We've both been in education. And I have to share this part of the story because this was the really big epiphany moment back in November of 2021. So this is the second winter of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to the Disrupt Yourself podcast with Whitney Johnson, and she was interviewing Jonathan on that podcast. And that was the first time in my life anyone had ever explained to me in terms I could understand what your FI number was. 25 times your annual expenses. And I remember listening to it and I listened to it again. And then I got out a piece of paper and I started, cause I pay the bills, right? So I've got a rough estimate of how much we're spending monthly. And I started doing these calculations. And like for the next 2 weeks to a month, I kept thinking about this. And then, when you get to the end of the year, like December, and you can go onto your Bank of America statement and it'll print out all your expenses for the year and your categories.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of like confirmed some of my humming to myself. And then I went and I kind of looked at our investments because we were always doing what they told you to do, that you're supposed to invest, you're supposed to do this, da 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 da. But I just figured I'd work till I'm 65 because that's what people do, right? I mean, that's what you do. So you just keep chugging along, you keep doing that thing. But then doing this math, I was like, wait a second. If this means this and this means this, we're going to be here in just a couple years. And so then I brought my husband in, and he's done a lot of our investing and he understands, stocks and everything. And I said, honey, look at this math. And he's like, oh. Yeah, right? This is, and so he's been doing calculations. And anyway, it was this big aha moment that we were like within 3 years of being able to unplug, reaching Coast FI, right? Coast FI. And then he would also have his 30 years with the district and then have his teacher pension, to just be in this space where we didn't have to be making as much as we were making and saving as much as we were saving, and that we could make a shift.
Mm.
And so that was scary and powerful and thrilling. And had I not heard that, I would not have had that epiphany, and I was like, why didn't anybody share this formula with me sooner? And so that, because of hearing Jonathan, then I jumped from the Disrupt Yourself podcast because I was clearly looking for new ideas, right? We're in the pandemic and I'm like, I need to change things up. I need something else in my life and challenge myself. And so then I jumped over to the Choose FI podcast and just started listening and absorbing. And then again, pulling my husband in to listen to this stuff and get all these ideas. And I think the other thing is once you realize that you can hit your Coast FI number and that you can change your life, that 8 to 5, that regimented schedule that takes up 80% of your time, all of a sudden it's like, well, what would I do? What do I want to do? Right? We're so focused on doing what you need to do, what you have to do, what you're expected to do, that to go back to this space of openness of, what would I like to do? Gosh, and then to have to really sit with, and who am I now? Who am I now at 53? Not what did I want to do when I was 20? And I think part of going through that whole process of reflecting on what do I want to do? What's important to me? What do
Mhm.
I want to do with the years I have left in my life, right? Because we saw so many people die during COVID that you're like, you got to do the things, right? Because life is precious, but then also letting go of some of those hopes and dreams from another era of your life and saying, you know, I'm not going to do that now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. So, anyway, that was the big epiphany. And then because of COVID, and you couldn't do anything, go anywhere, my husband and I love to travel, we had unintentionally saved a whole lot of money, like over $100,000 that was just piling up because we couldn't spend it, right? And we couldn't even have the work done on our house to refurbish our bathrooms and everything because you couldn't have people come in your house.
Mhm.
So we had all this money sitting there and we thought, we should probably do something with that. We should probably invest it. And so we went and we talked with our financial advisor and we kind of went through the usual stuff. And then I heard another Choose FI podcast, another great reveal about the 457 plan and how teachers and educators and public servants have access to this thing. And then again, I'm like, oh, someone shared a great secret with me. And so I go and I call our benefits department and I'm like, do we have this? Can I use this? And so then I talked with my husband. I'm like, okay, I know this sounds really crazy and it's okay if you say no, Anne, you're crazy. But I said, what if we not only maxed out our 403B contributions, but we also maxed out these 457 contributions so that we're essentially each putting $60,000, right? That's $120,000 and just stuffing it into our retirement because we have this money sitting in savings.
Yeah.
And if we were to just go invest it in a regular investment account, then we'd pay capital gains, all the rest of the stuff I said. But if we kind of do this through our paychecks and live off of what's in our savings account, then we can invest all this money. Oh, so we did a thing. We
Yeah.
did it. We did that thing. And so I will tell you that as we've gotten closer and closer, watching all that dwindle down in our savings account, but we've also seen our investment accounts go up, it's a little scary because we were sitting on a whole lot of comfort having that in savings. But
Yeah.
I'm really glad we did it because by the time we got to December of 2023, so just 8 months ago, we hit our FI number, our Coast FI number. And that number for us was 2 million. And looking at sort of for our equation, because of being public employees, we will get a pension from the state It's not huge, but it's something. And so doing the math of, well, here's what I'm going to get in my pension, my husband's going to get, here's what I'm going to get in my pension for me, and then supplementing the difference between your annual expenses with those investments from your retirement accounts. That's kind of how we pieced together the equation. And when we got to December and realized that we'd hit our co-SFI number, that's when we said, well, this is year 30 for you. If you wanna, then we can do this. We can actually do this.
Oh my gosh, it's like the peak of the story here. Like, I want to hear what comes next. I mean, we know part of what comes next, but before we do, I want to back up a little bit because you shared a lot of information that I want to talk about a little bit more. And one of the things is I wish everyone could have seen your face when you said, I started thinking about like, well, what would I want to do if I had this time? Because you had this huge smile on your face when you said that. And I could see for some other people, it might feel really scary to have that thought and to think, oh, yeah, I don't like the things that I liked when I was 20, but I also don't really know what I like anymore because in this season of my life, I've spent so much time investing in my family and investing in my career. So, can you talk a little bit about what that process was like for you? And I imagine maybe you're still kind of in that process, but how did you figure that out? And maybe something to like, how did you approach that with joy, which it seems to me like maybe you did?
So again, these podcasts and these interviews with others have helped tremendously. And it may have been you, actually. There's someone who's talking about, taking mini retirements and experimenting. Experiment, experiment, experiment. Don't work until you're 60 or 65 and then quit and think that you're going to know what you want to do. But the learning from others to do mini retirements and experiments. And I will say that being teachers, we're kind of lucky because of having summers off. I felt that for most of our career, we've had these mini retirements and gotten to do some pretty amazing things. So, as I shared earlier, I was a French teacher for part of my career, and we had lots of friends in Europe. And so, using our miles and getting all of us over to Europe for 6 weeks and gallivanting around and staying with friends and all that is something. So, we already know that we love to travel and learn languages and stuff. But the other things like, is it music? Is it volunteering? Is it coaching? Is it, actually giving yourself the space to not just reflect on it, but go try it, right? You got to go try the thing because you may think, I loved tennis when I was 20 something and I'm going to do tennis. And then you do it and you're like, oh my God, my knees, my arm, this isn't fun anymore. Whatever it is. But I appreciated from the Choose FI community, people saying, don't wait until you retire to do the experiments. And same things with other little jobs, go try and be a barista for a couple months. Go try other little jobs that you can have a low level commitment, right? Because this isn't going to make or break your career or anything. It's your life now, and you are at the smorgasbord of life, and you're going to sample and try stuff. And you don't know if you like it until you try it. There's a
Yeah.
whole lot of things I thought that I wouldn't like, and then I tried it, and I was like, oh, dang, that was super fun or really good.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting how we view ourselves as these static creatures. And so then we have some suffering around, like, I don't like this thing that I used to like anymore. And yet it makes so much sense, right? Because we grow and we develop different interests. And thank goodness we don't just like the same things our entire life. Yeah. But I think that can be a painful process for people.
Especially if you have hopes and dreams that were unrealized from an earlier part of your life.
Mm,
And I think that's been part of the deep reflecting. This was my dream. Is it still my dream? Is it still important to me? And how would I feel about letting go of that
yeah.
and saying that that was the Anne of your 30s? That's not the Anne of your 50s. And sometimes you're like, nope, I'm not ready to let go of that dream. I'm going to hang on to that for a little. Okay, all right. But you had the conversation with yourself to check in with how you feel about it, to know the priority and the space that it takes both physically, the stuff that's associated with being a drummer, right? Or the emotions and the space that that takes up in your being. And are you doing the thing, or are you just feeling guilty about the thing that you're still carrying with you, this expectation or this dream? You have to weigh all of that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of letting go, let's dive a little into this process of downsizing, because that's another thing, like something we talk about a lot in this community. Oh, this great way to increase your net worth is to downsize and you have smaller rent or smaller mortgage. But it's really, I imagine, quite an emotional process. And even when I have come like close to doing that, it's been really emotional to think about letting go of things, and that feels embarrassing to say. Like, I don't want to say that, but but we form such attachments to our lives the way that they are, and to objects that have meaning to us. And so I wonder, like, what was that process like for you? What were the hard parts of downsizing?
So I can't remember where I read this or who said it, but it helped me a lot in the process. And the saying is that both friends or people and things come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And with that in mind, it allows you to look at the items, the physical items in your life, the baby swing, the stroller, and everything, and say, that was for a reason. It was also for a season, right? But those things, those have passed, and I can let go of them now. I will say that what helped me a lot in the letting go process is finding people or places or organizations to whom I could donate them, that it met a need for them. If there was, friends who had just had babies, or they were about to start a family and they needed a dresser and a changing table, some of those things, to be able to give my things to those who would use them and value them and it would help them, made it so much easier for me to let go
Yeah.
because I wasn't using them anymore. What's hard is when you take a bunch of your stuff and you just throw it in a dumpster. I feel environmental guilt, right? And I know that happens. And I know from friends of mine who've had to clean up after their parents' lives, when their parents die, and then they have to go and just like clean out their parents' house. And there's stuff that they saved for an entire lifetime. That's hard. That's really hard. And I think the other thing that's hard about it is having to, again, confront that attachment to a thing and ask yourself, why do I feel this way about this thing? Is it guilt because I don't use it anymore, because I should bake more muffins and I don't bake more muffins, or my mom used to bake bread and I always wanted to bake bread, but I'm not baking bread? There's so many feelings tied up in the things, or here's this instrument I wanted to learn and I'm not learning. It's in those conversations with yourself about, am I going to do this, or have I not touched it in 10 years? And I just need to acknowledge that I haven't touched it in 10 years and I've moved on, and forgive yourself and let it go. And I'll say that the moments in the deciding and the confrontation, it's hard and it kind of sucks in your gut, and sometimes you cry. Sometimes people journal, and I think that's all helpful. But once the stuff is gone and you've decided where it's going to go and who it's helping, we looked around our house and things were just getting cleaner and cleaner. And we felt lighter. We
Ah,
felt lighter. We felt freer. I have to say that about a year ago or so, we watched the Minimalists
mhm.
documentary.
Yeah.
And that was super inspirational on so many levels, but that also helped give me inspiration to get started with just one thing a day. I know they do this thing where it's one thing one day, two things the next day, three things. I was like, okay, that's too much pressure. But again, from this community of just take action, just take one small step. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find one thing today that I no longer use, that has just been sitting around or whatever, and I'm going to put it in this pile to donate. And at the end of the month, I'm going to take that, so I had to give myself baby steps. And there were some things, like I'd go to a corner or a closet or a shelf and I'd be like, Ooh, that's heavy. I'm not ready for you yet. Okay, so I'm going to wait on that stuff. I'm going to go back to this is an easy one. We're going to do some easy ones. So it is a process, but I'm glad now because I feel like the items in my life are bringing me value and that we're going to use them. And there may be new things that come into my life given the stage and who I am and who I'm becoming. I like that question of who am I becoming now, right? Not who was I, but you're always a becoming. And so there are other tools and things that help you become as you evolve.
I love that. So you actually started this downsizing process about a year ago then, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
In that time, is there anything that you have regretted getting rid of?
I'll probably figure that out when we unpack the container on Friday. I'll be like, where's the blah, blah, blah? Remember you donated that? Oh, so I imagine there probably will be a few things like that. But so far, I think we're okay. I think one of the harder things, I actually talked about this with my aunt also, because my aunt cleaned up my grandparents' life, is when somebody dies and you inherit their stuff and you hold on to it because it's theirs or because it was their dream or their hobby. And it was actually my aunt who had come to a place with some of my grandparents' stuff that she said, I realized that this was my mother's dream and it was her passion and it's not mine. And I love her for her passions, but I am not going to keep this closet full of stuff, and that's okay. You know, and hearing that from her was also very liberating. I'm not saying it's not hard, it is. And it makes you dive in again, like you said, our attachment to stuff. What is it about the stuff? And it's very much memories, right? It's about the memories that are connected and the stories. And that's what gives us meaning and context. And I will share with you that my mom has Alzheimer's dementia, and we've been losing her for the last 5 or 6 years. And it has also made me, in learning about this disease and how families support their loved ones, how much they move into the present and how important the present moment is and celebrating that because that's what they have. And
Wow.
so, in my journey with my mom, that's been an important insight in terms of priorities.
Yeah. I love that you brought us here because it makes me think, I wonder, are there other ways that illness or death have influenced your journey as far as I know you said, okay, there was COVID happened and it kind of made you go, okay, we have to do the things that we want to do. We don't have forever. Are there other ways that death and illness have sort of influenced who you are today in terms of this big epic journey that you're on? And, we don't often think of like personal finance intersecting with death, but of course it does. Of course it does. Because both of those things highlight like what we value, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think of that question?
So I'll also share that my folks were from California, and they were wild '60s children who packed up and moved to Alaska in 1964 after the
Mhm.
earthquake for an adventure, and they never thought they would stay, and then they stayed. And so my brother and I were born there. But as my dad got older, he had pretty severe seasonal affective disorder and couldn't support the winters. And there's a lot of people who struggle with winter depression in the northern countries, and we consider Alaska a northern country. And so by the time my husband and I got married, my dad had realized that he needed to snowbird and that he was going to have to go away in the winters and then return in the summers. And my mom was a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she was still working and full in her career, and she wasn't ready to just up and go. And she said, okay, I understand you need to do this, but you're going to have to live on the amount of your pension, your state pension, because I'm still working and saving and investing for us.
Mhm.
And so my dad ended up living abroad. He lived in Turkey, he lived in Malaysia, he lived in Thailand.
Wow.
He went to Central America and South America. And he told my mom, I understand if you want to divorce me. You didn't bargain for this. And she said, I don't want anybody else.
Yeah.
So they did a long distance relationship for much of the last 25 years. And every other year, she would save up miles and she would go join him for a month or 6 weeks in one of these exotic places. And he lived, I mean, when you're in these other countries, the whole FI thing of, you can have a maid and you can have your meals and you can have a driver and everything. I remember it just being mind boggling. So that's what drove, it was the winter and the depression that drove him to explore this solution. And so I became familiar with the sort of geo arbitrage and living other places for less through my dad. But then the other sort of driver is the winters are hard, and growing old in an icy, cold place is hard on our seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband and I, the last number of years, supported our parents through those final years. And watching them retreat and live less because of being afraid of going outside and slipping and falling and not doing the things they wanted to do because of that fear, that was a real motivator because I thought, I don't want to not live. Yeah, I don't want to just sit in my condo and watch that's not living. Being out and being with people and seeing nature and hiking and touching things and feeling the sand under my feet, that's being alive. And it was one of those things that if you don't take decisive action and you stay in place, then you know what this is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, in their 70s and had reached a place where it was too hard for them to make a change. So you hear people who want to make a change, but they've arrived at a place in their life where it's too difficult. And it seems insurmountable. And so staying in place and continuing to do what you've done, even though that diminishes your quality of life, is the choice that you make. And seeing this play out with our parents, and I mean, other friends, everything. Alaska is hard. It's the most expensive place in the nation for healthcare. We don't have enough healthcare providers. We don't have enough senior services and homes and everything. I just felt like someone was foreshadowing and going, if this is what it's going to be unless you do something different. And that was a really big motivator because that was really hard. And I felt sad for my folks not getting to do those other things and retracting. I'll say the other thing is that generationally, our grandparents worked until 65, 70, and then got sick. And then the other one cared for them and they didn't get to do the things. My parents, it was the same way. They worked until, retirement age. And then my dad got sick and my mom cared for my dad. And then when my dad died, I've been helping care for my mom. And I told my husband and our financial advisor, we're not doing that. We are not going to work till we're 65 and 70 and have one of us get sick and then no, just no.
Yes. No.
There is a lesson that is being told to us here that we can make a change and do something different. And even if that means living with less, I would rather be able to say that I tried and we tried to do the things than repeat what has happened for the last two generations. So, yes, all of the death and illness has influenced my motivation to make a change and not repeat a pattern.
Yeah. And of course, there's something special about you that you were able to sort of recognize what that could mean for you, like what lessons were in that, and then that you were able to act from that. And I think there's something really important you were saying about there's something about the stage of life. Like I can act now, and I might not be able to act in 20 years. And so I'm doing it. Speaking of that, like you did this other really big thing of not just getting rid of half of your possessions, but also leaving like the family home, right? You said you were there, was it 26 years? And that seems like that feels emotional to me to think about doing that. What was that like for you? Or were there things that helped you to make that transition?
So that was hard. And there's also all of the reactions of friends and family of, you can't leave.
Oh, no.
You host Thanksgiving. You host Christmas.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go? you know, and all the memories in that home. And again, that whole thing of a reason, a season, or a lifetime,
Mm.
I came back to a space of feeling joy and appreciation of what this home gave me. And yes, all the memories that now what we're looking forward to is new memories and new adventure. We still get to keep all those memories. We still get to keep all that joy. It's not going away because we sold the house,
Oh, I love that.
right?
Yeah.
You know? And so it was funny because I would say that my grieving and my transition probably lasted about 6 months. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, I'm using the mixer for the last time, or I'm baking cookies in this house for the last time. I'm doing this for the last. There were all of these lasts, and I just kind of spent time with that. And sometimes I cried. And then once we got to the closing of the house and all the flurry of all that activity and cleaning, I was feeling really pretty okay. And then we did the final walkthrough, and we met the new owners. And again, I was not feeling emotional. I was good. We'd done a good job. We'd cleaned every corner. And the wife got out of her car and shook my hand, and she said, "Thank you for selling us your beautiful home." I lost it. I just started crying. I was like, oh, I thought I was good. I thought I'd done this for 6 months. you know, but what I reflected on, and what I shared this on Facebook, on a Facebook post, and again, it was part of my process of closure, was the first night that we did not spend in our home after we'd handed over the keys and stuff, is I closed my eyes and I thought of each room in the house, and I thought, what story would this room tell? What secrets does the downstairs bathroom have to share? You know,
Yeah.
with the teenagers doing their makeup, or talking about boys, or what does this closet have to share when it was a fort and the kids slept in it versus, and I just kind of went through each room and I savored each of those memories and those stories. And it helped. It really helped. And I think the telling of stories helps you move through the letting go and the honoring of those things. And again, just because the thing is gone doesn't mean the memories and the experiences are gone. You get to keep those with you. So again, moving to a place where I don't want to live in regret and sadness and sorrow. I want to celebrate those things, and I want to be excited about the present and the future, and I want to have space for that. And if you have too much guilt and grieving, there's not as much room,
Mm.
right? You need to make room for the joy
Yeah.
and welcome those new things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I asked this question earlier where I said something about, like, can you tell us how you have done this with so much joy? And I think I've solved it, which was hearing you talk in the last few minutes and you being so willing to, like, share your emotion with us, and some of it being hard, and having that be at the surface. Like, I think that's part of it, where you can kind of feel all of those emotions and you can recognize that leaving the family house is hard. Parting with some of your possessions is hard. And yet, by acknowledging that, like, you can also really access the joy. And so thank you so much. And do I have that right? I mean, I think that's it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's kind of like when you have a memorial or a funeral or something else, and you take a moment to remember and honor and appreciate the person, the deceased pet, the moving on, those ceremonies where we spend time and appreciate. And so sometimes that's with things. This is the doll that I played with when I was a child, and my mom made outfits for that matched me,
Oh,
and how wonderful that was. And I'm so grateful. I'm really grateful for that. And I'm going to donate this lovely doll to another child to whom that's going to bring joy. And so I guess there ends up being sort of a continuity That instead of me holding on to this and keeping it under the stairs in a box, I get to bring this thing out and it's going to serve in the world and help somebody else. So I guess that helps with my letting go, but it's that remembering and being grateful and then giving it up and giving it away.
Yeah. I think there's something so powerful about gratitude, and it's something I'm really trying to get better at. And yet what I notice is how often I fail, and how if I really look at like what my life is like now versus say 10 years ago, there's so many things that are better now, but because they're just woven into my life, I don't really appreciate them. And it's something that as I get older, I value more and more. And yet I really struggle with is that, you've said that word gratitude a few times. And I wonder if there is anything you can share about like how you have cultivated that.
I would say a lot of readings and podcasts and wisdom from different religions and philosophies that keep coming back to gratitude as a practice, right? And if what your life really is your thoughts, right? If all we are is our thoughts, what percentage of the time are your thoughts in joy and gratitude and appreciation and curiosity and discovery and problem solving? And what percentage of the time are they in resentment and anger and frustration and jealousy? And I think when I first read this idea of you are your thoughts are your life. And therefore, if you can have some agency around your thoughts and feelings and direct them, and it's not repress them, it's, oh, I'm feeling jealous right now. Let's get curious about that. Why am I feeling jealous? What's going on with me? And not beat myself up for feeling jealous or regret or sadness or loss, but dive into that feeling and be curious about it and then let it go, right? Okay, I've spent some time with you. I'm not going to let you, jealousy, own the conversation. We're going to talk and then I'm going to let you go and I'm going to move on to joy, curiosity, celebration, but that just like with your finances, right? Who's in control? Is the credit card, is the debt monster in control of your life and driving your decisions, or are you? The same thing with the presence of mind. And again, a lot of this comes from Eastern philosophy. And that was something my dad was also really into, even though he was raised Catholic. But the of being open and receiving, acknowledging, and then letting it go and it pass through, and that you can be intentional about your thoughts, just like with your actions, and that ends up being your life. And so when I find myself in a place of negativity or whatever, it's like, oh no, I don't want my life to be like this. Stop it. Distract, do something else. So, yeah, I guess that has helped.
Oh my gosh, what a great answer. Here I am asking you this like really hard question. I gave you no like prep of like, we're going to talk about this. And you just nailed it, right? It was like so simple and such a takeaway there of like, oh, how do I cultivate gratitude? And it's this framework of, well, think about what your life is. It's your thinking. And that's something that you can control, right? Like there's such a great takeaway from that. Okay, so let's go back to the story. You've just hit 2 million, your coast-fi number. You're having this conversation with your husband. Like, what does this mean for us? What happened next?
We had a vacation planned in Hawaii in January, and we took that week to really so it happened in December. We didn't expect it to happen in December. We thought it might happen in January or February. We didn't know when that number was going to do its thing,
Uh-huh.
but it had been kind of sitting there saying, this happened. But it's December, it's the end of the school semester because we were educators and it's busy, and then it's Christmas. And so we really didn't have time to think about what that meant. And so we're like, okay, once we get to Hawaii and we have this week off, we're going to just spend some time in conversation. We're going to open up the space to think about what this means and what we want to do. And so we had a lot of walks and conversations. and a lot of what ifs scenarios.
Hmm.
Because again, you're removing the structure, you're removing your job and your income and your daily schedule and your house. You're taking away all the structure. So you're going to be in free fall, right? And so we're at the precipice of making this decision that, yeah, are we going to do this, or are we going to wait another year? Are we going to wait 6 months? And so we decided that we were at that place, and that my husband was also feeling, really satisfied with his career and ready to let go. Sometimes you're not ready to let go. You're in a building process, or you're in a training process. You want to get to a place where you're at peace with letting go and handing things off. And so we felt like we could be there. And so then I think it was in February that he gave his notice, and then in March I gave my notice. And I think I emailed you. I was like, I'm about to go in and talk to my boss,
You
and I'm
did.
so
So
nervous.
awesome. You did it.
Yes, yes. And so here's another a snippet, other than a reason, a season, or a lifetime for stuff and people. The other little mantra that I've had in my head that I got from The Artist's Way, it's a book called The Artist's Way, is she says, jump and the net will appear. And I have said that to myself more times in the last year. The net will appear. The net will appear. You will figure stuff out. You have always landed on your feet, right? And even when you fell sideways, you rolled and you got back up again. And so we have jumped, and we now have a place to stay. So that's really good. But the next part, the next phase of what is life going to look like next, we don't know that chapter yet. So that's sort of where I leave you. I have some ideas, but we made the leap. And then a lot of it was kind of like, well, you have to do these things to get ready to sell your house. And again, from the Choose FI community and other people, we decided to sell our house on our own instead of using a realtor. And so that was a big learning process, and we did it.
Yeah.
And so that's another whoop, whoop, empowering thing we figured out. And also that other people told us that, oh, you guys can do this. You can do this.
Yeah. My question was it as stressful as we all hear? Like, it sounds like it was worth it to you.
It was worth it. I won't say it wasn't stressful. And because the market is so hot, we were receiving full price offers on our house before we had even listed our house. It's kind of like when people show up at the party and you're still in your bathrobe and curlers and you're not ready. We had people making us offers, and we're like, we're still getting the trim on the doors. Come back next month. Go away. I'm not ready to show yet. So it was stressful, but we just knew that it was going to be an intense couple-month process and that we would get through it. And then we had some time to wrap things up with the house, with the stuff, with saying all our goodbyes. So it was good. But we're now, as soon as we get settled, then it's that next question of, now what? And I will tell you, in January, where my brain was Tim's going to retire. We're going to move. I'm going to find a job because I'm only 53 and that's what I do. And I will apply with school district. I had already gotten certified in the state of Washington. And so that's just what we do. And so I actually started applying for jobs in the spring, flew down here to Puyallup and interviewed for a job, and I was really excited about. And then when I flew back and I started thinking about getting the job, I was like panicking because it was all going to happen at the same time in August with us moving, us going back and moving my mom down here, and then start of the school year. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done by going after this job? And then, my husband and I talked, and we looked at some numbers and thought, you know what? If I don't work for 6 months, that's going to be okay. And we're going to just buy some time to move and get settled leisurely. And rather than jump into the first thing or the first job, give myself the space to find out what I want to do or what the right opportunity is. And is it full time or is it just part time? Or do I take on contract work? That's part of that. What does this new opportunity look like now? Or do I take the whole year off? Right. And then it's like all of a sudden these things that I never thought, because what I always do is I find a job in the fall because I'm a teacher. And so you just do that. And so I realized that for the last 6 months, I was kind of thinking on autopilot. And then I was a second runner up. And the reason why I didn't get the position was because I was not available to come in 2 weeks early in August because of my move. I did full disclosure with the move. And they said, this other person is not. And I said, thank you. Thank you. It was such a privilege to come talk to you and learn about your team and your district. I don't regret doing it, but I also learned a lot in the moment of, I'm not ready for this right now. And that's okay. And so then we reprioritized and looked at our finances and said, we've got some room to breathe and we're just going to do this. We're going to embrace this transition and figuring this out. And we're not going to jump into anything too quickly so that we make the right step and we take time to explore. So that's where we're at right now. We'll have an address, we'll have a place to sleep, and then comes the exploration and what will you do next?
Oh my gosh, so exciting. So the idea is you've got this rental for the year, and that gives you time to figure out what you want to do. And is it also about like figuring out if you want to buy a house? Is that something you're thinking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to buy? Does it make sense to buy? Because I've also listened to some wonderful podcasts, again, given how high interest rates are, of talking through the rent versus buy. Does it actually make sense? We are in a position, having sold our home of 26 years, that we think we should be able to buy something outright. But still, there's cost involved with all of that. I mean, we just saw how much it costs to sell our house. And because the other thing is, if we don't like it here, we're not going to stay. That's the other sort of open thing is what if we don't like it? Well, if we don't like it, we can change. Oh, wow. Because we are writing the story as we go. We all are. And I guess it's like we all have been all along, but we have been duty bound and responsibility bound to our families and our children and our parents. And it's not that we've let all of that go, but we're just at a different stage that allows us to do this and experiment. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be able to do that and say that. And yeah, so I don't know what the next chapter is, Ginger.
Yeah. What's the thing that you are most nervous about having done this transition? Because I could see a lot of different things coming up, for people in this position where it's like, I don't have like my community. I don't quite know what I'm doing for work. If I'm taking off from work, I don't know how I'm going to fill my days. Like for you, what is the thing that feels like it has the most like anxious energy around?
So I would say community, and if I'm not working, how am I going to fill my days? Those are two. Community is really important, and you can't wait for community to come to you. You have to go out and seek it. And so I will say to help us in this transition, one of the things we did where I asked my husband to do a crazy thing is I said, there's this conference called Economy in Cincinnati. Do you want to go meet other people that are doing what we're doing and just talk to them? And he said yes.
Yeah.
A little skeptical at first, but so taking that plunge and again diving into that community of people that are doing things differently, and they don't talk to you like you're crazy. They're like, wow, that's really cool, tell me your story. Oh, that sounds neat, we could try that. Because back home in the structure of everybody else's lives and routines, when you deviate, that's disruptive. And some people don't know what to think about that. And maybe they think you're crazy or that you are disrespectful or that I don't know. I've kind of run up against a variety of different feelings around what you're doing by retiring or coasting sooner than is normal, right?
Yeah.
You talk to older people, and that's not, no, you need to go find a job, you know? So in going to economy and talking with all these people that are doing stuff differently, it's just very refreshing, and you don't feel that judgment. You just feel open to share. So I have plugged in to the Tacoma, Olympia, and Kitsap FI groups here with Chris and Kristen Young, whom I met at Economy. And they said, "You're coming to Washington. We'll hook you up." And so, because I know how important community is. And so I haven't met them yet, but we've corresponded and they've looped me into some groups. We also have friends down here. They were Alaska friends who moved down here about 4 years ago and have been dropping hints about us coming down here too. So we have them, and they've invited us to their church, which has been delightful and wonderful. So finding a church community. And then I'm a singer. I've always been in choirs my whole life. So one of my main things is I've got to find a choir. And so I reached out immediately because this is audition season. If you're going to be in a choir for the season, you audition in August or September. So that's, again, sort of my go-tos for starting to get into something, things that bring me joy, is I'm auditioning on Monday for a choir.
Wow.
And I don't know that that means I'll get in, but I'm like, I'm just going to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to go do it. I'm just going to show up. And
Wasting
what
no time.
That's right. That's right. It's that experiment. Just keep putting yourself out there because you don't know what else is going to happen. And then there's, these Choose FI groups, and then there's the church group. I saw that my alumni group from the University of Redlands is doing an alumni thing in the greater Seattle area. And I was like, I could actually go to one of those. Up in Alaska, that almost never happens, right? Because it's too far away. And so I'm like, there's just things that I could go to and be curious and meet people. And I don't know where these opportunities are going to go yet. But unless I put myself out there and find what I'm resonating with now, then I'm not going to be able to plug into that. I will also share that at this time in my life, part of what has given me courage to do this, it's since our younger two have just launched, right? And they're out in the world doing their things. And of course, as the parent, you're busy coaching them, saying, apply for that internship, go for that scholarship. You should present at that conference. Absolutely. I mean, you're their coach. And it's like, I kind of thought, I need to take my own medicine. They're doing it. We can do it too. So it's kind of fun, a totally different season of life, but to be like this week, our son is moving into a new apartment, and he was apartment hunting and shopping in Madison, Wisconsin, while we're doing it here in Tacoma. What did you find? How much are you paying? Are utilities included? And so, like, we're having those same conversations, but we're in a totally different space in our lives. And I would also say I feel spoiled in a way because with our older kids, we have gotten to do the grandparent thing. We've gotten to do the grandparent thing for over 10 years and luxuriate in that, and have those relationships and build those relationships. And so I guess part of what's scary, building community, I feel like I have some clues about starting to build community, but part of what's going to be hard is maintaining those relationships from home, from Alaska, still making space to welcome people in your life, being intentional about whether you set up FaceTime or Zoom, or what does that look like now that we have stepped away so that we can still maintain relationship. And not just when you're here for a long weekend, but how do you maintain relationship? And we're learning that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's end on talking about recommendations, broadly conceived. So, first of all, I'll say a while back you had mentioned that it was helpful to hear about other people experimenting and doing the mini sabbaticals, or the mini retirements. And I think you were referring to Jillian Johnsrud's
Yes.
podcast, called Retire Often. That's what it is. It's
Yes.
really good. It's a short series. I think it's only like 8 episodes. But if you haven't listened to it, it's really fun to hear people sort of at different stages of their life with different incomes, their experience with taking 3-week breaks or 3-month breaks. So thank you for reminding us about that. And you also mentioned that The Artist's Way was a book that has been helpful for you. Are there other books or podcasts that they could be money related or not that you have read in the last year or listened to in the last year that you thought were helpful?
I will say that, so not finance, but Ozan Varol and Famous Failures podcast
Okay.
and Think Like a Rocket Scientist. And what I was attracted to with Think Like a Rocket Scientist and Famous Failures is doing things differently, challenging the status quo, questioning your presumptions, the way you've always done things, going back to first principles. The ideas in his book and the disruption that is caused when you question what you've always done and you try something new, and how that leads to such tremendous growth. We as humans, we like safety, right? We're geared for safety and comfort. And the thing is, though, when you get too comfortable, you actually get bored. And so finding that space between where I have enough comfort and I have enough challenge to make things interesting, right? And then you can make things really interesting by quitting your job and selling all your house and all your possessions, right? And we can survive that for short periods of time, that kind of disruption. But he interviews amazing people from all over about things they tried and experimented, businesses, inventions, moving, traveling, and they just have fascinating stories. And again, their stories in the Famous Failures podcast gave me courage to try, because I feel like when you're a kid, you try all this different stuff, you have no fear. And then something happens as you get more settled and you get more secure and more protective of your stuff and of your lifestyle, that you don't want discomfort. I don't know. And so we sometimes get stuck holding on to where we are because we don't want to step out of our comfort zone. And listening to these stories of people who tried and failed and then got back up on their feet again, and what they learned about it, it gives you the courage to disrupt yourself, disrupt the status quo, to step out of your comfort zone and go, this is good for me, this is good for me, this is good for me. It's like those people that do the cold plunges and stuff, which I'm not, I like the sauna part, but the cold plunge. So, but I would say that was starting with Ozon Varol. And that actually got me through the first winter of the pandemic, because I needed to distract myself from the pandemic. I needed to learn, I needed to travel, I needed to get my brain out of being stuck in my house and on Zoom, and to think that there was going to be a day when we could have dinner together and birthday parties together again. All those things we took for granted. So I got through his whole season and then wrote to him when it was over, and I was like, no, what am I going to listen to? What am I going to do to, help me get through? And that's when I shifted to Whitney Johnson's Disrupt Yourself podcast. And so those were two really great ones to get me thinking differently and to give me the courage to think outside the box and experiment and have the courage to try stuff. And so I started trying stuff at work. I started trying stuff in the kitchen. I started, I was like, I think I've sort of gotten stagnant and I don't want to be stagnant. So what
Yeah.
am I going to do to shift things up? And then I found Choose FI, and then we just kind of turned, woohoo!
And now we're here.
And now we're here.
Yeah, I love those recommendations. I think one of the most interesting things about people, about us humans, is that we're really bad at knowing what will make us happy. And so, like, even as we're having this conversation about, like, people don't like uncomfortable things, yeah, I don't want to be uncomfortable. And yet I've had that experience that you described where it's too much comfort. Like this thing that you think that you want to, be on the couch and have absolutely no responsibilities feels really good for about 2 minutes. And then, we have to find a challenge. It reminds me of, I hope I don't get this name wrong, Alex Honnold, the guy who did the free solo ascent on Yosemite. He's this famous climber who does these
Oh,
crazy, crazy climbs. And I saw this clip of him the other day where he was talking about how important it is to do physically dangerous things. I don't want to do physically dangerous things, but he had this really interesting perspective where he said it changes how you view stress in the rest of your life.
yes.
And, he said, I go to the airport and I see people freaking out because shoot, their flight got canceled. And what are they going to do? They're going to be 3 hours late. But him having this experience of of real danger means that in his daily life, he experiences those things at a completely different level. And that's sort of like what you're talking about too. And that's the kind of thing that helps move me towards risk, I think in a positive way in terms of, yeah, we're designed to do these things. And if we kind of can take some of these risks, it can sort of reset the measure by which we understand the stress in the rest of our lives.
And to understand, as both you and Brad have mentioned, that we are fighting our amygdala, right? We are fighting our reptilian brain that looks for signs of danger, and we amplify that. And so we do all these things to protect, protect, protect. And so when you have those adventures, when you have those momentous things where physically or maybe it's emotionally, you survived a social dinner party that you were dreading and you came out of the other and it's like, I actually had a good time. When you do that, you can talk back to your reptilian brain that goes, I'd rather stay home and watch Netflix. Go, you say that, but really, remember last time when you went rock climbing and it was terrifying and exhilarating, you have to talk back to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then push yourself to take action. And even if it's just baby steps, right? But then you feel proud of yourself that I know what Netflix is. I know what, and it's not, you can do Netflix as well, it's fine. But if you decide that what you want out of your life, that you don't want to be stagnant, that you want to, then you have to make yourself do these other things. And so, again, putting yourself out in situations that cause you fear and having it turn out okay, again, like you were saying, helps bring down your anxiety about other things where you're like, oh, that's nothing compared to the time, blah, blah, blah. We're going to just chillax here. And then I think that also helps you be that rock for other people who get spun up around you. And you can just kind of take it in perspective and kind of breathe. And I know I appreciate those people in my life too. And I've had my spun up moments. I'm certainly sometimes the person that needs to be talked down, but I feel that the more you take risks and you come out on the other side, that it just gives you that perspective of, I got this. I can
Mm-hmm.
figure it out, you know? I love that about engineers because that's like all they do is problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. And so they just know there's almost no problem I can't figure out or that I can't Google or that I can't ask somebody. And so they're just pretty unflappable. So, unless of course the structure is going to collapse, then they get a little upset. And so, anyway, I appreciate all of these readings to understand my programming as a human and be able to take steps to overcome that and embrace risk to live the life I want to live. Because living with regret, that is the greatest fear. I don't want to live with regret. I want to say I did the things or I did most of the things. And I want to be able to look back in those moments at the end and feel satisfied, not like I still have this itch that I never scratched.
Yeah. Sounds like you're doing a pretty good job.
Trying.
Okay, I'm going to end with two recommendations. One is specifically for Anne and anyone else, I guess. But you have to watch Free Solo.
Okay.
Okay. You're going to write that down. Yeah, that's
Yes.
really, really good. And then my other recommendation is not about finances at all, but it's for the people out there who connected with what Anne was saying about seasonal affect disorder and how disruptive that can be, especially to people in our neck of the woods where we have these really, really dark winters. And so I just wanted to share this because a lot of people don't know it. A lot of people have heard of the happy lamps, or sometimes they're called sad lamps, right? Like you have the
I
little,
have one.
yep, I have one as well. But what a lot of people don't know, they don't actually like read the directions on them. And so they get these small lamps that are like the size of a book, and then they set them back so far that they aren't actually effective. And if you look at what you're actually supposed to do with those small ones, it's something like 6 inches from your face, which is just like really awkward. And so if you're going to give this a try, go on Amazon and get one of the big ones, right? The ones that are like 24 inches. I don't know if that's right, but something like that, right? And then you can just have it sitting there while you're doing your computer work or having your breakfast or whatever. And you'll have a way different experience. So that's our tip for today. Get your giant happy lamp.
We ordered ours from Canada because the
Uh-huh.
Canadians wrestle with this too. And again, it's big. You have it between 6 and 12 inches from your face. You use it at the same time every day because it sets your circadian rhythm.
There you go.
And I'm a believer.
Yeah, they definitely work. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Anne, for being willing to have this conversation and not just being willing to be on the show, but to tell us so much about who you are and being vulnerable with us about what this experience has been like for you. I think it's really helpful to hear from someone who is doing the things right now and hearing about what that's like. And even just hearing you talking through some of those things that are hard, it gives me more courage just thinking about, gosh, she can do it and I can do it too, you know? So I think it's really helpful for people to hear that. And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you all. I hope you're still with us, and we will see you next time on Choose FI.